Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. I'm Mona Duncan, your moderator, and today we are continuing with Robert Martin. He does one a month for us, which we're really delighted. And he is talking about a new book that he's in the process of writing. And today it's going to be on the chapter where we're looking at changing our attitude. So I'm looking forward to this, Robert. Thank you very much. So we're ready when you are.
Okay, so actually today we're going to be talking about long-term goals and steps to those long-term goals. So it's very much related to reality therapy and all of those ideas that go along with it. And it's going to be a little bit of strategies at the beginning and then some tactics. And we'll go ahead and I will share a screen with you. Okay, are we now? Is that now, okay, we're now screen sharing, Mona?
Well, we're screen sharing, but you need to make your particular one down at the bottom where it shows it, where it makes it onto the full screen.
Right,
There you
okay.
go. That got
Okay, very good, yes. And I need to. So let me back up a little bit here. Somehow, okay. I'm going to have to restart. Sorry for this. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about focusing on short-term steps that move toward long-term goals. And the whole idea is to balance our lives, whether we're teachers or whether we're doing other kinds of things. And we're going to talk about strategies and tactics. I'm going to start with a few strategies to begin with. So the first thing is to limit our goals to the long-term goals that we have to 1 or 2 or 3 at the most, or possibly if we have more, that's fine, but to put some of those on hold. And I find that's the way that I've learned how to deal with things that are more than I can manage, is to focus on maybe one key goal at a time. The other thing is to make long-term goals challenging, because we need things to strive for. We need things that we want. We need things that are meaningful to us. So this kind of comes to the question of, what do you want? What do you really want from reality therapy? And then what goals are going to prove satisfying? The goals that are going to prove satisfying are those that tend to involve personal relationships, satisfying work, and then something we don't usually think about, something that's difficult and something that involves discipline. That is to say, strenuous effort that uses and develops all of our skills, because when we're doing something that takes discipline, then we really have to focus, we have to concentrate, we have to put ourselves in a state of flow where everything else kind of disappears, and we don't have our mind on the clock all the time, but we're really focused in. And I think that's what makes something satisfying. And then to avoid regret, we need to avoid climbing the wrong ladder, which means we need to climb the right ladder. We want to not put our ladder against the wrong summit, because if we get up to the wrong summit, then things will be unsatisfying. And that's why I put that we need to have things that include relationships and satisfying work, and not be primarily about fame or money or all of those things, which might be nice, but they don't lead to satisfaction unless they also involve relationships and meaningful work. So then the key thing is that we need to have a lot of steps to achieving those long-term goals, and we need to make them as easy as possible. Excuse me. We need, because one of the things that I've found for myself and working with other people is that we all have resistance to doing things that are difficult. It's easy to we all know from our experience making New Year's resolutions is that they're almost impossible to keep. So in other words, the goals need to be challenging, but then the steps toward them need to be easy enough that they overcome our resistance. And this comes to where we want to help ourselves and others focus on simple, doable, measurable plans, because that's the easiest way to deal with resistance. And this is where we come to the whole idea of reality therapy, which I would like to call the reality strategy, because we can use it in everyday life. I think I use it in everyday life. It's precisely designed to get people to change by making simple, doable, and measurable plans. It's designed to overcome resistance to change, which generally comes from things that have been traumatic in the past. So what does it mean to focus short term? Well, okay, what are the activities that are going to take us in the direction that we want to go? And then what time of the day will work to focus on those, even if it's only for 10 or 20 minutes. I've been planning a vacation, and it's like I'm just kind of doing one thing a day, which I hope takes 10 minutes. Sometimes it's taken an hour or two. But everything's getting done. So how can we focus on the details that move us toward long-term goals when we have so many things to do? And I think I've learned this from a friend and a teacher of mine who basically has taught me to juggle projects by working on them sequentially. And so I don't try to work on every project every day. It's kind of like, well, today, what am I going to work on today? And generally, because I have my mornings free, it's what am I going to work on this morning? So let's talk about some tactics. And keep in mind, a tactic at one level can be a strategy at another level. This is an idea of strategy and tactics, where a strategy is composed of tactics, but each of those tactics can be a strategy that has tactics for achieving it. So the first thing is to take care of business. What things do I need to do consistently? What things do I find it easy to put off? Where do I sometimes not take care of business? Because even though these things might not have anything to do with a long-term goal, such as proving out our state, we tend to not get our statements proved out when we should. So we may, all of a sudden, we have 2 months worth of statements. And so financially, it's better if we kind of keep up with things. So I've phrased things here as questions, because the whole idea is we need to ask ourselves questions. Information doesn't help us very much. What helps us are questions. Questions, well, what do I need to do? What am I putting off? What am I not taking care of? So then number 2 is, where can I spend time that will make a difference? We all tend to spend time on things that are easy and don't really go anywhere. we want to put in time every day on activities that move us toward our long-term goals. But if you can't get started because it's like it's too overwhelming, what would be a smaller task? Even if I only have 10 minutes, what could I do for that 10 minutes? And if it turns out to be 20 minutes or a half an hour or whatever, hey, that's fine. That's fine too. And this goes for at work, and it all goes for at home. I mean, the more responsibility you have at work, then the more you have to juggle your activities because you generally have many more responsibilities than you can possibly deal with in a day. The third thing is to make time for important tasks. Don't wait until a task becomes a crisis. So again, it's this idea of like, what do I need to keep up with to avoid problems? So to change behavior, we know that self-monitoring works really well. Am I working on a key project every day? Am I keeping a record of this? I don't generally keep a record of this because I reserve time every morning to work on a key project. But I don't always decide what the key project is until that morning. I do keep a record of my weight and my blood glucose because I have a problem in that area. And so I know, yeah, it's going to get away from me if I don't do it every day. And so I make a record, I keep a record. 5, we've all heard about using to-do lists, but I would say only use a short list for tasks that you might miss or skip. Don't bother writing down everything. If you know you're going to do it anyway, you don't need to write it. So keep it short and then prioritize it. Do the more intense things when it's most advantageous for you, when you know you've got the energy. It's generally, this is called pre-macking, where basically you do your most difficult thing first, and then you do your less intense thing first, so that your less intense task becomes a reward for doing your more intense tasks. We've kind of throwing out the idea of like, we'll do something and then reward yourself by, I don't know, giving yourself a chocolate or whatever. It's like, no, you want to reward yourself by doing a more difficult task by, oh, I get to do the easier tasks now. And that will prove satisfying to you. And then you do the lesson tests and more enjoyable activities last. Although you can also intersperse them. You do a difficult task and then a fun task. A difficult task, a fun task. So for me, as absurd as it seems, either putting the dishes in the dishwasher or taking them out of the dishwasher is not what I call a fun task, but it's so much more fun than doing a lot of other things that I have to do that it becomes a relatively fun thing. So once you start doing this, it keeps you going. Number 6 is, what can I say no to? And who can I say no to? I have this saying that I really like, and I don't even know where I got it. Everyone should do something. No one should do everything. I remember we were in a faculty meeting, and we got out of the faculty meeting, and one of my fellow colleagues on the faculty said, well, I learned something from you. And I said, oh, really? What did you learn? She said, I learned that you could say no. And I didn't know whether she meant I myself could say no, or that everyone can say no, and that she could say no, because she had a great deal of problems saying no. So if you need to say no, it's okay if people sometimes get mad at you and don't like it. because people getting mad at you can be a way of controlling you, something that Glasser has pointed out, that anger can work, that depression can work because it can work to control other people. But they're still really terrible strategies for making friends and having good relationships. So I've tried to make a rule for myself. How many extra projects are you willing to take on? Like I've made a rule for myself. I'm usually right now, I'm not on any boards. I made a rule for myself. I will only be on one board at a time. And for most of the last 5 decades, I've been on one or another boards. But then that's it. No 2 boards at a time. Another way, a way to gain time is to ask, what doesn't need to be done perfectly? What can I do and just get it out of the way? Okay, I mean, we're not in the army. We don't need to make our beds perfectly. We can just do it. We can just take out the garbage. We can just do clean off 2 or 3 things off of our desk each morning or each afternoon. We don't have to sit down and take an hour and clean off the whole thing. So think about it for yourself. What can you do that you don't have to do perfectly? And particularly if you like to do everything perfectly, it's a way of coming up with a plan that is going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. And hey, that's okay. The whole thing with perfectionism is being a little uncomfortable to not do everything perfectly. Now, when it comes to doing things like writing or preparing my presentations, I try to do it as perfectly as possible, but not at the beginning. As soon as today is over, I will probably spend a little bit of time on the next presentation, which is a month away. And I won't try to do it perfectly. I'm just trying to get some ideas down. I'm just trying to get a few things going so that my mind is working on that. Number 8, what needs to be done as perfectly as possible. If you need to do something perfectly so you're getting stuck, just do it and get it done, and then improve it. I think that's a wonderful strategy. So I try to come up with a rough draft of these presentations as 3 weeks away from giving it, and then realizing the more I look at it, then I'll improve it. And I did some things this morning before we got on. I did some things last night. I did some things yesterday. So I'm constantly trying to improve things, but I'm not trying to do it perfectly just at the beginning. Number 9 is shelve or delete low priority projects or hire somebody else to do them. What's a project you no longer care about that you could give up? You would disappoint yourself a little bit. Oh, gee, I hate letting that go, but you're just never going to get around to it. And it would ease your mind to give it up. What are some objects you no longer use or care about that you could get rid of so you don't have to deal with them on a regular basis? And then finally, what's a task I can hire someone else to do? That's may take a little planning, but that can be very worthwhile because then you're not trying to do everything yourself. Number 10 is something I really like, and that is gain time to think about things when you're asked to do something. If you can't say no immediately, just say, okay, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And then you can think about, am I really willing to do about it? If you don't really want to do it, just say no. Number 11, my favorite, drunken projects. Projects that you work on when you're way too tired to work on them, but you just do them anyway, and it's like being drunk. That is to say, you do it and you can't really think about it. So one of my best projects ever, which turned out to be a musical composition called 100 Views of Mount Fuji, and there's Mount Fuji on the right of the slide, which was actually made into a CD and turned out to be one of my best projects. I would get home often or get finished with things preparing for the next day. It'd be 9 o'clock, 9:30. I would sit down and I would just say, I'm going to just do something for 10 minutes. And I would just fool around and I would get something down. And after a year, I had 100 small pieces, which I got somebody to do. So to me, this is something that I stumbled on, but works really well. So think about that. What would be a drunken project for you? And finally, when you don't have time to do anything, make 10 minutes commitments. When you're stuck and you can't get started, make a 10-minute commitment. When you're just feeling a lot of resistance, make a 10-minute commitment. And if that doesn't work, just make a 1-minute commitment. I hate clearing off my desk. Sometimes I made commitments where it's like, okay, every time I go by my desk, I will pick up one piece of paper and deal with it. And that's all I've been able to do, but that really works. After a week of doing that, it's mostly cleared off. Okay, to summarize, what are my long-term goals? Even if you're retired, you need to have long-term goals. And I've worked with people counseling who are retired, and it's like, well, gee, I'm just not happy. I don't know what to do with myself. Well, you have to have structure in your life. Most people have the most problem on the weekends if they're working, or maybe if they're retired, because they don't have the structure. And that's where we get into trouble. So work on your key goals and you won't have time to take on everyone else's work. In my line of work, and maybe in yours too, we tend to be rescuers. We tend to take on other people's problems. We tend to take on other people as projects. And that doesn't work. You can't even do that for your own children. You can't really cure anyone else. You can't fix anyone else. You can help them fix themselves. Glasser used to say, well, when they send you a kid with a school, they're not sending you the good kids. They're sending you the kids that need help and saying, here, fix this. But that's not what you actually do when you practice reality therapy. You're helping them fix themselves. And then again, summarizing, it's okay to say no, even if it disappoints other people at times. And then make the steps easy enough to overcome resistance. And no matter how high the ladder is, as long as your individual steps are simple, doable, and measurable, it'll work. And then monitor to find out where your resistance. I've become aware of all of this stuff that I've talked about. It's all logical. It's all simple. We all know it. I didn't tell you anything you don't already know. But where we get into the problems are we feel resistance and we don't even know where it's come from. And it comes from past trauma, fears from past traumas, or failures from the past, or things that we've learned to tell ourselves that are negative, or we're not even sure and we need help figuring out where our resistance is coming from. And then finally, spend some time every day on your long-term goals, even if they're only 10 minutes. and try to create that sense of flow where you're total focus in the moment so that you're in the moment right now. And then your life is satisfying. You don't even know that you're happy. You don't even know that you're having a satisfying and rich life because you're so involved in what you're doing. Whether it's working on a project of your own, or it's doing something at work, or it's teaching someone else, or it's learning something. Once you get into that sense of flow, it's rewarding. That's what satisfaction is. That's what happiness is. Happiness is not, oh, gee, I'm really happy. It's rather being involved in something that's so engrossing that we don't even notice that how satisfying it is until it's like, oh, gee, an hour has gone by. 2 hours has gone by. I didn't even realize. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I would like you to tell us what is your definition of tactic and strategy?
Okay, well, so this is basically a strategy can be a tactic. Okay, in other words, strategy, you start at the highest level. What's your basic strategy? Okay, it's like, how do you go about, what do you want to do with your long-term goals? Like, let's say my strategy is I want to do something every day or every week to maintain good relationships with my family. And then below that are all of the tactics. Well, I want to talk to everybody in my family at least once a week. And then, but that's a strategy for having other tactics, such as like, okay, well, I'm going to have to call my son because he's in another state. I'm going to have to call but I can do this on the phone. I can do this on Skype, however it is. So in other words, strategies and tactics are tactics are the individual behaviors you use to fulfill the strategies, but there can be still more individual behaviors. So those can be strategies for still lower order behaviors. So anything can be a strategy and a tactic. So moving up are strategies, moving down are tactics.
Okay, that sounds good. So the strategy is kind of like the end result.
Well, it's the big overall view, okay,
Yeah.
such as reality therapy questions, that's like strategies, but then the individual tactics are, well, what am I, it's like, well, what do I really want? Or making plans. It's like, well, I want to spend more time with my partner. Okay, well, that's a strategy, but then, well, tactics, how am I going to do that? So it's moving down to becoming more and more specific, which is, and that's where this whole idea is. Once you've gotten down to a task that's simple, measurable, and doable, that's like a tactic. The strategy is the overall, what do I really want? The tactics are, how am I going to get there? What are those simple, doable, measurable strategies? And by the way, does anybody know where I've always heard those three things attached to reality therapy, but I didn't know if those came from Glasser or someone else. I have no idea where I picked that up from.
What were the three things?
Simple, measurable, and doable. And I'm sure that I picked that up at a Glasser conference, but I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
But it really fits the whole idea of reality therapy.
And there was a statement that you said, every once in a while you can hear a statement that just opens the eyes where you can really see something in a different way. And you made the comment, you said, go for questions over information.
Right.
That is really powerful because
yeah, and that was what Glasser was so good at, was asking questions, but we're not always as good at asking questions as giving. It's easier to tell than to ask.
Yeah, but to even ask yourself questions,
Absolutely.
because it expands what you're looking at.
It's easier to tell yourself what to do, and then you don't do it, than to ask yourself, well, how could I actually get this done? What's my specific behavior I could do? Yeah.
Well, Sue sent a little text saying that it was Robert Webolding that came up with the simple, measurable, and doable.
So
Anyway, we're going to close out, and those that are here will ask questions and talk with Robert for a while. So thank you very much for your presentation, Robert, and
thank you
many
very much.
blessings to all.